The first time I saw her, she was sitting alone in the library after closing hours. The only light left was the warm desk lamp that turned her hair into soft gold. She wasn't reading. She just sat there with her hand on an open book, staring at a page she hadn't turned in minutes. I should have told her we were closing. Instead, I stood there for a second too long, watching her thumb press against the corner of the page, as if she couldn't decide whether to move forward or stay. "Elena," I said, clearing my throat. "You, forgot your tea again." She looked up, startled, then smiled faintly, the kind of smile that didn't reach the eyes but still made you feel something warm. "You always notice," she said softly, reaching for the cold cup. "I notice everything," I joked, trying to hide how my voice caught halfway through. She chuckled, low, tired, real. The kind of sound that makes you want to hear it again just to make sure it wasn't imagined. We'd met 2 months earlier when she started volunteering at the library after what people whispered was a messy divorce. I never asked. She never offered. Our conversations were always about books, small things, like the smell of rain through old paper or how quiet meant something different depending on who you were with. That night, though, something had shifted. The air between us wasn't just quiet. It was heavy, like a word unsaid. She closed the book, stood up, and brushed invisible dust off her skirt. "You should go home, Noah. You've got your whole life waiting. And you don't," I asked before I could stop myself. Her hand froze mid-motion. For a heartbeat, she didn't breathe. "Mine already happened," she whispered. "I'm just waiting for the rest to make sense." Something inside me ached at the way she said it, like she wasn't talking to me but to some ghost sitting beside her. I wanted to reach out, touch her hand, tell her she wasn't alone, but I didn't. Instead, I just nodded because that's what you do when you don't have the right words. We walked out together. Her car was parked under a flickering streetlight, old and small and too quiet. She hesitated before opening the door. "Noah," she said, turning to me, "you shouldn't wait for people like me." "Then maybe," I said, surprising both of us, "you shouldn't talk like you're already gone." Her lips parted slightly, and for a moment, just a breath, she looked at me the way no one ever had before. Not like a boy, not like a mistake waiting to happen, but like someone she could almost believe in. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was full of things we didn't say, of choices neither of us was ready to make. She finally got into the car. I watched the headlights fade until they disappeared down the road, and still, I stood there, the night swallowing everything but the sound of my heartbeat. That should have been the end of it. But when I locked up the library and walked home, my phone buzzed. One new message. "You were right about the tea. It's better when someone remembers." I stared at the screen, rereading her words until they blurred. Then, before I could talk myself out of it, I typed back, "Then I'll keep remembering." A few seconds passed. Then 3 dots appeared and vanished. And just like that, I knew whatever line existed between us had quietly moved. Outside, thunder rolled in the distance. Somewhere a doorbell rang. And for the first time, I didn't know if I wanted to answer it. Elena started showing up earlier after that night. Not every day, but enough that I noticed the pattern. She'd stand by the window before opening hours, holding a thermos of coffee she never finished, pretending to read while the city outside still yawned awake. One morning I asked, "You're here before the sun now. Can't sleep?" She smiled faintly. "I've forgotten how." I wanted to ask why, but her eyes had that distant look again, like she was remembering something too sharp to touch. I found out later that she used to be a high school literature teacher, 25 years married to a man who didn't believe in conversation. Her words, not mine. She told me once, offhand, that silence could bruise you if you stayed in it long enough. Me? I didn't have much to tell. My parents divorced when I was a kid. My mother disappeared into her job. My father into his new family. Maybe that's why I noticed people who tried not to be noticed. It wasn't supposed to mean anything, her stopping by the library early, or her staying after closing, asking about my classes, my writing, my future. But the pauses between her sentences began to feel like invitations. and I didn't trust myself not to step inside them. There was one evening late, the rain soft against the windows, when she asked, almost in a whisper, "Do your friends know you talk to me this much?" I shrugged. "They'd say I've got an old soul." She laughed, but there was something unsteady in it. "They'd say I'm too old for anything resembling a soul anymore." I looked at her then, really looked. The way she held her coffee like it was a fragile thing. The faint smudge of ink on her wrist from marking books. The soft line of exhaustion under her eyes. "You're not too old for anything," I said quietly. She didn't answer, just stared at me, long enough that the silence began to feel electric. Then she reached over, brushed a strand of hair from her face, and her fingers grazed mine. Just for a second. Barely a touch. But it was enough. Every nerve in me sparked to life, my breath catching before I could control it. She noticed, of course she did. Her hand froze midair, and she whispered, "Noah, don't." "I'm not doing anything," I said, but my voice was too soft, too honest. "That's the problem," she murmured. "Neither am I." The rain grew heavier, a low hum filling the space between us. She stood abruptly, gathering her things with trembling hands, eyes fixed anywhere but me. Before leaving, she turned back just once. Her lips parted, as if she wanted to say something, but all that came out was a breath. Then the door closed, and the air she left behind still smelled faintly of her perfume, and the risk we both pretended not to name. I told myself I'd keep my distance. After that night, I stopped texting first, started answering later, shorter. I even avoided the morning shift at the library. But somehow, Elena always found her way back into the hours I thought were mine alone. One Friday, she brought a box of old books. "Donations," she said, though half were marked with her name on the inside cover. "They're just taking up space," she murmured. "Might as well give them to someone who'll actually open them." When I reached for the box, our hands brushed again. A flicker. Nothing. Everything. She stepped back quickly, her expression unreadable. "Noah, you really should be careful with women like me." I tried to laugh, but it came out too dry. "I don't think there are women like you." Her lips parted. Not for a smile, but for something heavier, like regret. Then, as if on cue, the bell above the door jingled. A man in his 50s walked in, tall, sharp suit, face too familiar from her framed photos at the front desk. Her ex-husband. I knew instantly. His voice carried that tone, ownership disguised as politeness. "Elena," he said smoothly. "Didn't think I'd find you hiding in a library." She froze. Even her breath stopped. I stood there, suddenly aware of how young I looked. My rolled-up sleeves, the ink stains on my fingers. He glanced at me, assessing, dismissing. "I just came to return a book," she said, steadying her voice. "You should go." "Still dramatic," he replied, stepping closer. "I came because the kids won't talk to you. You need to stop texting them." Something in her face cracked then. Just a flicker of pain, quickly buried. "Sir," I said quietly, "you're upsetting her." His eyes snapped to me, irritation flashing. "And who are you?" "Her student." The silence that followed was unbearable. She didn't answer. Neither did I. He smirked, shook his head, and left, leaving the faint scent of cologne and something colder behind him. Elena turned to me, her face pale. "You shouldn't have said anything. I couldn't just—" "You don't understand," she interrupted, voice trembling. "He's still connected to everything. My house, my accounts, my children." I wanted to reach for her again, but she moved away, putting distance between us. "I can't lose more, Noah," she whispered. "Not for something that isn't even." She didn't finish. I stepped closer, heart hammering. "Isn't what?" Her eyes lifted to mine. Tired, wet, defiant. "Safe." We stood in the aisle, inches apart, the world narrowing to breath and pulse. "You think I'm safe?" I asked quietly. "I think you're real," she said. "That's worse." The air seemed to thicken. I could smell the faint trace of her perfume again, the rain-soaked fabric of her cardigan. My hand moved before my mind caught up. reaching for her cheek, brushing a tear she hadn't realized had fallen. She didn't pull away. Not right away. Her breath caught. My fingers lingered. Then, she stepped back, eyes closing. Don't. But her voice wasn't a command. It was a plea. We stood there in silence, the clock ticking too loudly. I took a step forward anyway, just enough that I could feel the warmth between us. I can't stop thinking about you. Her eyes opened slowly, wide and wounded. That's exactly what I'm afraid of. Before either of us could say more, my phone buzzed in my pocket. It was my roommate, Ethan. Dude, you left your notebook at the library. I'm coming to grab it. Panic flickered in her face. He can't see me here. I glanced toward the door. Then stay in the back room. 5 minutes. She hesitated, then slipped away behind the shelves. My heartbeat pounded like footsteps in an empty hall. Ethan entered, drenched from the rain, shaking his head. Man, you're still here? You need a life outside of books. Yeah, I said, forcing a laugh. Something like that. He grabbed his notebook, eyeing the coffee cup still sitting on the desk, hers, lipstick on the rim. New coworker? He teased. I shrugged. Volunteer. When he left, the bell jingled again, the door closing behind him with a thud that felt louder than it should have. I waited for the sound of her footsteps returning. Nothing. Elena, I called softly. No answer. I walked into the back room. The window was open, rain drifting in through the frame. She was gone. But on the desk lay one of her books, water-spotted from the storm. Inside the front cover, a note written in her familiar, slanted handwriting. I told myself this was just a story, but stories always go somewhere, don't they? I pressed the page to my chest, half in disbelief, half in fear. Outside, thunder cracked again. Sharp, sudden, electric. And for the first time, I realized I wasn't sure if what we had was beginning or already ending. It had been 4 days since she disappeared from the library. 4 days of checking the volunteer schedule, pretending to shelve books while staring at the door. 4 days of silence from the only person who ever made that silence feel full. I finally found her by accident, or maybe I'd been looking without admitting it. She was sitting at the cafe across from the library, the same one she always said had too much light for secrets. Only now she wasn't alone. Her ex-husband stood beside her table, leaning in too close, voice low and sharp. I couldn't hear his words, but her body said enough, shoulders pulled tight, hand gripping the edge of her cup until her knuckles went white. I shouldn't have gone inside, but I did. She saw me immediately, a flicker of surprise, then something like fear. Noah, she said softly, standing as he turned to look at me. This isn't. Didn't realize you had a son that age, her ex sneered. Something in me snapped. I'm not her son. The man laughed, slow and cruel. Of course you're not. Elena, I said, ignoring him. You don't have to talk to him. Not like this. Her lips trembled. He's just trying to make things right. By cornering you? Noah, please, she whispered, voice barely audible. You're making it worse. For a second, I hated how small she sounded, not her, but the way he made her become that small. I turned and left before I said something I couldn't take back. She followed me outside, rain already beginning to fall. Why did you do that? Because he doesn't get to talk to you like that. He can, she snapped. He still holds everything, the house, the bills, the kids. I'm trying to keep the peace. I took a breath, chest heaving. And what about me? What am I to you when you keep walking away? She looked at me, eyes wet and furious. You're the only thing I want to keep, and that's exactly why I can't. The words hit harder than I was ready for. Rain dripped from her hair, tracing the edge of her jaw. She looked exhausted, beautiful, terrified, like someone caught between running and staying. Say it, I whispered. If you don't want me, say it. Her mouth opened, but no sound came. Instead, she stepped closer, just enough that I could feel the heat between us even through the rain. Her hand lifted, hovered near my face. Trembling. We stood like that, inches apart, breathing the same wet air, hearts pounding too loud for the storm to hide. Then she whispered, barely moving her lips, "Don't make me choose." And before I could answer, lightning cracked across the sky, and someone's shadow appeared through the cafe window, watching us. The shadow in the cafe window wasn't her ex-husband. It was my roommate, Ethan. At first, I thought I was imagining it. The blur of a face behind the glass, the startled movement when I looked up, but by the time I turned fully, he was gone. The next morning, he was waiting for me at home, leaning against the counter with that same unreadable smirk. "So," he began, tossing my phone across the table. "Want to tell me why Mrs. Hart has been calling you?" I froze. "She what?" "She left a voicemail. Said not to come by the library today. Said you need space." Sounded scared. I reached for my phone, but he blocked it with his hand. "Noah, are you sleeping with her?" The question punched the air out of me. "It's not like that." "Then what is it?" I had no answer, because I didn't know how to explain what it was. Not love, not lust, something deeper and quieter and impossible. Ethan's tone softened. "She's married, man. She's not." I shot back, louder than I meant to. "He left her. She's still wearing the ring," he interrupted. "I saw it last night. I didn't believe him. Couldn't. But when I looked at the photo he'd taken, blurry through rain-specked glass, there it was, her hand. The faint shimmer of a gold band she'd always hidden beneath a sleeve or a book. Something inside me twisted. That afternoon I went to the library. She wasn't there. Neither was her car. But her desk drawer, the one she always kept locked, hung slightly open. Inside was an envelope with my name written in her careful handwriting. I hesitated before opening it. Inside, a single page. "Noah, I didn't lie about wanting you, but I did lie about being free to." I told myself it was over, the marriage, the house, the past. But it wasn't. Not yet. He still owns everything, even the version of me you met. Please don't come looking for me. I can't lose what little I have left. There was no signature, just a faint smudge of ink, like her hand had trembled as she wrote it. I sat down, the words burning into my chest. It wasn't just betrayal. It was something worse, the realization that maybe I'd been the one pretending all along. Pretending she'd choose me. Pretending I wasn't just another chapter she'd close when it got too heavy. I folded the letter carefully, put it back where I found it, and locked the drawer. As I turned to leave, my phone buzzed again. Unknown number. "She didn't leave town. She's with him. Stop calling." The message had no name, but I knew whose number it was. Her ex-husband's. And beneath the anger flooding my chest, one truth pulsed through everything. I wasn't ready to stop calling. I found her 2 nights later, in the same place I'd first seen her, sitting alone under the lamp in the library, pages open but unread. She didn't look up when I walked in. She didn't have to. "You shouldn't be here," she said softly. "You said that the first time too," I replied. A long pause. The hum of the lamp filled the air between us. "I meant it this time," she whispered. I stepped closer, but carefully. "Then why are you here, Elena? Why come back?" She finally lifted her head. Her eyes were rimmed red, not from crying, from exhaustion. "Because it's still the only place I feel like myself. And that's the problem, Noah. You make me feel like I still exist." I swallowed hard. "That's not a problem." "It is," she said, voice breaking. "Because I built a life around people who stopped seeing me. And the moment you looked at me like I mattered again, I started breaking all over." For a moment, neither of us moved. Rain whispered against the windows again, the same as the night everything changed. "I know about the ring," I said quietly. "I saw the photo." She looked down at her hand, the faint mark where the ring used to sit. "He wouldn't let me take it off in public until the divorce was finalized. Control looks polite when it's legal." The room tilted. Everything I'd been angry about dissolved into something worse. Understanding. "Why didn't you tell me?" "Because I wanted one thing that wasn't broken yet," she said, meeting my eyes. one thing untouched by the rest of my mistakes. I took a slow breath, my hands shaking. You're not a mistake, Elena. She smiled, small and sad. You're young enough to believe that. Before I could answer, she stepped closer, close enough that her perfume mixed with the scent of rain and dust. Her hand brushed my jaw, trembling, tentative. I shouldn't, she whispered. Then don't, I murmured, but I didn't move away. Her eyes searched mine. Fear, longing, guilt, everything colliding in one impossible second. And then she leaned in, forehead resting against mine. We didn't kiss. We didn't have to. The air between us was enough to burn. When she pulled back, she was crying, quietly, almost with relief. I'm leaving town, she said finally. For good this time. My chest tightened. You don't have to. I do, she said. Because if I stay, I'll never stop choosing you. And that's the one thing I can't afford to lose. The clock struck midnight. She took her bag, paused at the door, and turned once more. Thank you, she whispered, for making me remember I was still capable of feeling. Then she was gone, into the rain, into whatever came next. I stood alone, her warmth still on my skin, the echo of her words looping in my head. Love hadn't saved either of us, but it had made us real, if only for a moment that couldn't be taken back. It's been months since that night, the night we chose love over everything else. I still remember her trembling hands, her soft voice saying, I don't care anymore. I just want to be with you. Those words carved themselves into my soul like a promise and a wound all at once. But life, as I learned, doesn't give you love without demanding something in return. Evelyn left her husband the next morning. 25 years of marriage, 3 grown children, a house full of memories. Gone in an instant. She told me she felt free for the first time in her life. And I believed her. We thought love was enough. We thought we could outrun guilt, judgment, and the ghosts of the life she abandoned. For a while, we were unstoppable. She would laugh again, that deep, warm laugh I had fallen for in the first place. We made plans. A small apartment near the lake. A trip to Italy. We talked about starting a business together, maybe a cafe. Every dream began with we. But the world doesn't forgive easily. Her kids stopped speaking to her. Friends vanished. Even strangers looked at us with quiet disapproval when they realized our age difference. She pretended not to notice, but every night I could see it wearing her down. The loneliness, the guilt, the doubt. And me? I tried to be enough. I worked extra shifts, cooked dinners, left her notes on the mirror reminding her she was beautiful, strong, brave. But love can't replace the life someone left behind. Can only make the silence louder. One night, I came home and found her sitting on the balcony, staring into the dark. Her phone was open. A text from her daughter, unread. I didn't say anything. I just sat beside her. After a long silence, she whispered, "Do you think love is supposed to hurt this much?" I didn't have an answer. I only reached for her hand, and for a moment, she didn't pull away. That's the thing about love. It doesn't always end in grand gestures or forever promises. Sometimes it ends quietly with 2 people who gave everything they had and realized it still wasn't enough to make the world kind. We didn't break up. Not officially. We just stopped trying to fix what was breaking us. She went back to her family after a few months, said she needed to make peace to heal, and I let her go, not because I stopped loving her, but because I finally understood that real love doesn't chain someone down, it sets them free. Sometimes I still see her name pop up online. A new picture, a post about forgiveness, and I smile, because despite everything, I'm grateful for her, for the moments that changed me, for the love that taught me what being real truly means.